Football is on the verge of a revolution. For years now, modern football had reached a stalemate, with every team from top to bottom so tactically astute that they began to cancel each other out. But this era of obsessive perfection and systematic domination has led to something unexpected happening. The artists are taking back control, and they might be better than ever. Tactical organization was beginning to dominate modern football. Every team knew how to press and how to keep the ball, and that also meant that they became experts at nullifying those same tactics. The result? When two well-coached teams met, it increasingly began to look less like a football match and more like a chess match. Players moving in perfect coordination with spaces covered before they could even emerge. And no player felt this more than... For almost all of footballing eternity, the Mercurial 10 was the talisman of every team. The artist whose eye for a killer pass, whose moments of magic were so valuable that managers were happy for them to do nothing defensively, so long as they could conjure something out of nothing when it mattered. They lived for those moments, where time seemed to stop, where one touch, one shimmy, one perfectly weighted pass could change everything. And for a while, the 4-4-2 was the dominant formation in some leagues, a defensive structure that was almost tailor-made for the 10 to find space between the lines, helped by the fact that most teams weren't defensively organized to begin with. The environment of the era created by the fans protected them as well. This was before the age of instant statistics and replays, and before every touch was analyzed and every missed pass scrutinized. Fans didn't demand a goal or an assist every game. They came to witness moments of pure imagination, and as long as you could produce magic often enough, the rest was forgiven. The field was their canvas, and the best artists painted game after game. But things quickly began to change. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. It may have taken a while, but eventually defensive teams will discover the perfect counter, and thus we saw the rise of the Destroyer, a position almost tailor-made to make the number 10's life a defensive hell. Suddenly, the room that they had enjoyed vanished overnight, not helped by the rise of sophisticated video scouting that meant that the magic tricks of the 10 had been seen ahead of time. If that wasn't bad enough, two more factors led to the destruction of the 10. The first is that the Destroyer began to evolve quicker than the 10. All the 10 was there to do was to provide the magic, but the Destroyer quickly added a second dimension to their game. They became maestros in possession, knowing that the lazy 10 would not close them down. So now the Destroyer could be the first point of possession with that extra space afforded, practically creating a 3 versus 2 in the midfield. No longer could teams afford to have a defensive passenger in the midfield, regardless of how much magic they produced. Managers needed somebody with the work rate to close their man down. And then the second thing happened. The teams in possession realized that yes, we still want to have the metronome deep, but against a two-man midfield, having a magician between the lines could still be a good thing. But if it couldn't be a midfielder because they wanted this advantage, then who could it be? It's not that Messi or Pep invented the false 9. The likes of Totti in the 2000s and countless others before him operated similarly, but the Barca domination made this concept more popular. And the last thing a team with a false 9 needs is a 10, and it was the final nail in the 10's coffin. So what happened to them? Well, the ones who could adapt found themselves doing a job out wide and then drifting in, or deeper in more of an 8 role. And those who couldn't, well, it was a slow and painful death. If the magic through the center had been neutered, maybe salvation could be found in the one other position on the pitch synonymous with trickery, flair, and imagination. The position that made the crowd rise to their feet. The winger who would pick up the ball and get past his man with a shimmy of the hips. And in earlier stages of football, most wide defenders were just that. Defenders who happened to play wide. They were solid but not agile, so quick and tricky wingers were too slippery to grasp. The remit for most wingers was simple. Get past your man, hit the byline, and swing one in to the two forwards waiting in the box. And pre the stats era, football wasn't about over-optimization, so the winger had the freedom to constantly try and take on his man, knowing that as long as they produced enough jaw-dropping moments, no one would be fussed about the dribble rate and cross-completion percentage. But just as the tactical revolution had strangled the number 10, the winger began to run out of oxygen. It started when their greatest nemesis began to turn the tables. For so long, the fullback's primary role was to defend. But as the years rolled by, the fullback began to push forward more and more and more. Initially, only rare exceptions were actually threats when they went forward, but soon, the standard for every modern team was to have a hyper-aggressive fullback who could actually make the difference in the final third. And a more aggressive fullback demanded a more defensively astute winger. Action and reaction. Suddenly, it wasn't always the silkiest winger who got the nod from managers, but it was the one who was willing to work, to help the cause in the defensive zone, and follow their fullback. There were other issues though that were layered in. Defenders were becoming more athletic, able to keep up with wingers in a foot race, and having access to thousands of hours of footage helped defenders cope with them better. But one of the biggest factors was definitely a tactical one. With fullbacks overlapping, there was now less reason for the winger to be looking to hit the byline through complicated but entertaining dribble mechanisms. What made this even more important was the tactical trend of having two centre forwards, for so long a staple of football, was also dying out, and so it was pointless having your best attacking outlet hit the byline for a cross. To make things worse, it wasn't just that they now had one man to hit from the byline. Sometimes they'd have no one at all, due to the decline of the pure 9 and the rise of the false 9 at the same time. With less threat from the 9, the winger was asked to do something different, because now the goal threat had to come out wide. We saw the rise of the inverted winger, and later the inside forward to supply goals. Football's flair position was now football's efficiency position, with the sole goal being to produce goals and assists. The system had fully taken precedence over the individual and the fun. But football has a funny way of correcting itself, because one look around Europe shows an emerging trend. Like a phoenix from the ashes, we began to see the 10 re-emerge. It started when possession sides realized that playing with 3 deep midfielders was great for keeping possession deep, but not great for creating opportunities from the most dangerous parts of the pitch. But the pesky destroyer was still a massive deterrent from a dedicated man here. But soon the fullbacks began to invert, meaning that the attacking midfielders now found salvation in the half spaces. It was the potential for the 2 versus 1 against the destroyer, and the option to create like a traditional midfielder or make runs through the half space. And if the defensive midfielder followed, well, that was just more room for the remaining 10 or the false 9 dropping in. The same was true when the 10 was nominally part of the front 3, like Florian Wirtz, but able to come into the space. The 10s had found their new canvas, turning that difficult space between fullback and centre-back into their playground. But once again, defensive teams started to adapt, either through back fives, at least when defending, or hyper-vigilant midfielders who would track every movement. But as the games rolled by, we have also seen attacking midfielders try to adapt by reincarnating the midfield diamond, allowing them to create a 3 versus 2 here to give the number 10 space to work their magic creatively, or as a goal threat. But even if teams are evenly matched here, something might be fundamentally changing in football. When every team knows every pass before it's made, every run before it's started, and every pattern before it unfolds, what's left? Pure creativity. The ability to do something unexpected, something no tactical system could predict. When every team knows every pattern, every movement, you need a spark of genius to break the deadlock. A pass from nowhere, whether you're marked or not, or that bit of ingenuity to get past a marker. And these new creative midfielders, well, they're not just back, they're more complete than ever. Gone are the days of being stuck between the lines, waiting for the team to create the perfect moment. These are complete footballers who can drop deep and dictate play, or drift wide to create overloads, all while being able to thread passes from anywhere on the pitch. And how do you mark that? How do you contain a player who could appear anywhere? But here's what makes them truly lethal. They've learned from the era that tried to kill them. They're more disciplined now, more possession safe when needed, so when the killer ball isn't on, they're willing to keep the game ticking. They're also physically bigger, able to ride challenges that would have floored their predecessors. And perhaps most importantly, they're hyper efficient. Where many 10s before were all about the assist, this new generation has also developed the thirst for goals that modern stats-driven football demands. And speaking of evolution, look at what's happening out wide. The tactical stalemate has created something fascinating. Teams have become so good at negating each other's systems, they've increasingly turned to man marking. This created an unsolvable problem. When everybody's matched up perfectly man to man, how do you break through? When the defensive team has seen every pattern of play and every permutation, how can you make the difference? Just how do you get past a seemingly impenetrable deep block? The answer, as it was all those years ago, lies in individual brilliance. Because here's the beautiful irony. When a system is built on perfect man-to-man marking and solely to counter possession sequences, beating one defender doesn't just create a 2 versus 1, it creates chaos. The second defender who steps out, well, he's leaving his man, and that man becomes free, forcing a third defender to adjust, leaving his man free. One piece of skill doesn't just beat a defender, it makes the entire defensive structure collapse like dominoes. But these modern wingers aren't just about flair and crossing like their predecessors. It's not all about the spectacle. They're marrying the skill of the past with the ruthless efficiency of the present. The flair to get past their man paired with the ruthless efficiency of the inside forward. The skill is a means to an end. The revolution is still in its early days, but as teams become more organized, more systematic, the need for these artists will only grow. Because sometimes when two perfect systems meet, you need something more than perfection. You need magic. Great news! I've just launched my newsletter, The Tactical Digest, to give you an even deeper look into the tactical side of the game and so much more. It's completely free through my link down below, so check it out.